I think one of the first questions that people usually ask is, 16 habits, that's so many. How am I going to manage that? I know you created a playbook that sort of helps us to answer that question, but how do you answer the question? How do I choose which one? How do I get started?
When I use the habits of mind, lots of times, depending on the class, I think it's very important to know your students, to know the classroom culture, and design the habits around the need within the classroom. 16 is a lot. That is a lot. However, if you space them out throughout the whole year, that could be effective. I always present the habits of mind to my high school students, each and every one to them, at the first week, the first 2 weeks of school. And as the year progresses, as that first month progresses, lots of times it's very important to identify the need, as I stated before, and talk about the needs with the students, and where we need to go, expectations for the class. And then kind of around October, November, because we start school in September here, it's kind of around October, November, it's kind of when we start to implement maybe 4, 5 habits of mind. I just feel that all 16 is too many. However, it is important that they know all 16. I always want them to know them. So usually, I start out with 4 or 5 in the beginning of the year, and they are the ones that we use as our expectations for the classroom, our guidelines. But then we also have a lot of journaling as well, where they can also delve into other habits of mind that aren't part of our curriculum in the class. So, for example, if we had persisting, striving for accuracy, managing impulsivity, and thinking flexibly as our 4 for the class, the whole class in general, and part of our expectations and our guidelines, they can step out of that comfort zone in their journaling and write about a different habit of mind, if that makes sense. So we have one for the whole class that we follow. We usually have 4 or 5 for the year. But I always like them to step out of their comfort zone, as I said before, and explore others. It's very important.
So I know, Dan, that when you say that stepping out of your comfort zone, you also do something that helps the kids know whether they're growing with the habits. Would you mind just checking in with that a little bit? Like, what does that look like? I know you have checklists and things like that sort of help them to keep track of how they're doing.
Yes.
Would you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. So there's a habits awareness checklist. If we could bring that up, if that's available to pop up on screen. Wonderful. Great. So this checklist is, what it does is it allows students to explore habits on their own. So we have our class habits that we follow, class habits of mind and expectations for the year. But then it also allows them to explore on their own. So on this checklist, what students do is they select 4 habits of mind that they're going to work with, on their own throughout the year. And what they do is they list them. So there's 4 of them, and they put how, where, when, and why they use them, if that makes sense. Okay. So they list them out, and then below is a checklist. So on that checklist, it has the habit of mind in the first column. So they put all 4 habits of mind there. And then in the second column is a minus or a plus. So that minus is, okay, I need to really work on this habit. I don't feel that I am, I had been mindful. I had been aware of this habit. And then they write a little comment on the side in the third box. If they put a plus, they do the same, but they explain how it has helped them, how they're mindful of it, where they've used it, how they've used it. So it really allows them to take the habits of mind and be proactive with them, ones of stepping outside their comfort zone. So they know the ones within the class. We all work together on them, but then I like for them to explore 4 others. And lots of times we do the checklist bi-weekly. Sometimes we do it monthly. Sometimes we do it weekly. Again, it all depends on the classroom. but it has been very effective because it allows them to explore more.
That's really very helpful, Dan. Thank you so much. The playbook is so practical and approachable. And that'll give you an opportunity, Michelle, to sort of talk a little bit about the checklist that you have with the younger children and how you use that and share that in the playbook.
So one of the things about the playbook, and the reason that it's called a playbook, is because I wanted to be sure to convey that the habits of mind are not a separate curriculum, that they're kind of a way of thinking, a framework for interacting and learning, and building community in the classroom. And a playbook signifies things we can do, concrete things on the ground that we can do in the moment, to advance a conversation, to advance learning, to solve a problem, to grow as a community. So there are 5 different kinds of lessons, but one of them leads up to what Dan does in high school, and that is the class inventories. One of the things that I did early on in the development of the playbook is to really look at the 16 habits of mind from a developmental point of view. And it really is interesting how the playbook, how the habits of mind can really be looked at developmentally. So in the playbook, the first round of habits of mind that are developmentally appropriate for young children are responding with wonderment and awe, which they do naturally, gathering data through all the senses, and kids are very sensory. They're very aware of what they're seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, but really giving that importance through gathering data from those experiences, remaining open to continuous learning, and questioning and problem posing, which we know they naturally do say, why, what, how come? And so really giving language to this, a common language, as Dan was saying, to the habits of mind, and making this a classroom venture for young children is a great way for them to begin to see what habits I'm good at, what habits I am learning, what habits am I growing as I go through the year. And so the class does this together. And they can do noticing of other people who are practicing a habit. So I noticed that Joey is remaining open to continuous learning when he keeps trying at this activity. So it's not only a reflection for themselves, but a reflection for themselves as a group, and a reflection for themselves and each other. And that builds not only learning, but community. So that's the goal. And then there's a 2nd through 4th list that takes this to the next step and asks kids, which habits do they find that they are naturally good at? Which habits do they sometimes use because in certain situations they use them? And which habits they really want to grow and why? And that really leads, if a district is really working on habits of mind and they're using the playbook and then using Dan and my curricula, it moves through developmentally from pre-K through 12th grade.